Jamie with Stonemaier Games for my weekly live cast. Today is March 4th, which means that it's also our time for our monthly e-newsletter. So I've put that in a link in the description of this video. I'll include it on the YouTube version of it as well. And if you subscribe to our e-newsletter, you'll probably get it in your inbox any minute now. So I'll discuss some of those topics in a little bit. I'll start off with some fun stuff as people start to join us. Let's start with the chocolate of the day. I love the chocolate of the day. We helped some friends demolition their kitchen the other day, and as a treat on the way home, we went to P.F. Chang's, and Megan introduced me to the Great Wall of Cake from P.F. Chang's. Here is mine. It is a giant piece of chocolate cake with really nice moist cake with good icing, and the feature are these little miniature, I don't know if you can see them in here. Yeah, you can kind of see them. There's an entire side of the cake is covered with miniature chocolate chips. This is a cake that is good enough for like 4 people. Mine has lasted 3 meals so far, and I'll probably finish it off at lunch today. And it is really good. So that's my chocolate of the day. It's not on my desk, but that's my treat of the day. So what's your treat of the day? What are you indulging in today in terms of food? I see. I'll note this since I just saw that Phoebe Wild just joined us. There are a lot of Kickstarters that launched yesterday, and Phoebe's is one of them. Phoebe has created a new line of really nice clothing with subtle hints of board game icons and things like that integrated into the clothing. And so if you're interested in board game themed clothing, particularly the kind, my favorite kind, which is like clothing that looks good and kind of winks at board gamers, like if you're a board gamer, you'll recognize like the hexes on it or a specific pattern on it. But if you're not a board gamer, it just looks like a nice piece of clothing. It's my favorite type, and that's what Phoebe has created on her Kickstarter. That is, I'm blanking, Cherry. Phoebe, note in the comments what the name of it is. I'll just look it up right now. Ludo Cherry. Ludo Cherry? Yeah, Ludo Cherry. Ludo Cherry on Kickstarter right now. And there's a lot of other stuff that launched on Kickstarter yesterday. Let me see if I can look at all the stuff that went through. There was the new Chronicles of Crime, which launched. They're doing a really cool series of having different time periods for the different Chronicles of Crime missions and scenarios. 3 different time periods. I backed for one of them, and I'm not sure which one I'm going to pick yet. I'm curious what you think. Let's see if I can pull that up. So there's one set in like the 1400s, and one in the early 1900s, and one in the future. I'm leaning towards the one in the future, but I also love medieval stuff, so I might go for that one, or I might just upgrade my pledge and get both of them. And each one has like a little twist to it too, a little thematic and mechanical twist that I thought was really cool. Viscounts of the West Kingdom launched yesterday, or very early yesterday, and that's doing great. Well done to Shem for completing that part of his series of games. The West Kingdom trilogy. What else launched? The graphic novel Adventures launched. Mind Management launched. I know I'm missing some too. There's another big one that I'm forgetting that launched, but I might be thinking of Viscounts. And both Marvel United and Wonderland's War are ending today. Wow, both very close to one another in terms of when they'll end. So lots of fun stuff going on Kickstarter today. But the big news for us, let's move away from Kickstarter. Our first game that launched after we stopped using Kickstarter in 2015 was a game called Charterstone, a legacy village building worker placement game that I designed. And we finally have it back in stock. It's been out of print for a little while, but we brought it back in stock. I actually have my advanced copy right here. If you haven't played it, we have it in stock on sale on our web store right now for the next week. I put it on sale kind of to celebrate it being back in stock. We don't usually let games go out of print for a while, but Charterstone, I think we made maybe too many copies in the first print run. We made a lot of copies, and so it took a while to kind of flush out the market of those copies. So I gave it a little break and then brought it back because it's a game that I really love, and I wanted to share it with more people. The one difference in this copy of the game, let's see if I can find it. Yeah, really the one difference is that we included a printed FAQ in this version. Normally we ask people to download it, but we just decided to include it in this copy of the game. The FAQ I don't think is entirely necessary. I don't think it is necessary, honestly, but it does in a legacy game where you want absolute clarity on certain things that may be unlocked in a different order, weird order, or do the constraints on the rule cards. I think the FAQ does help, so we decided just to include it in the game. But yeah, I'm excited to see more people discover Charterstone because it has been pretty hard to get for a while now, and it is on sale on our web store for the next week. You can see a link in the description here if you're curious about it. That's one of the main things. That is really the main thing that I featured on our e-newsletter today. If you have any questions about that, feel free to ask me in the comments. In fact, let me jump over and see if there are any questions here. Carol says, did the push your luck and bag building mechanisms finally get you to back Wonderland's War? Carol, I did. Yeah, I did back Wonderland's War. Excuse me. Stefan said that he just finished Elantris last night. He said he randomly came across my blog while searching for the Cosmere reading order. Very cool. Yeah, you may have found my my post about Brandon Sanderson. Brandon Sanderson is one of my favorite authors, and I've read enough of his books that I had enough for a top 10. So I have a top 10 favorite list for my favorite Brandon Sanderson books, and Elantris is on that list. Keith asked for the chocolate of the day again, and Keith, today's chocolate of the day is my remaining piece of the Great Wall of chocolate cake from P.F. Chang's. Matt says, for your living card game-esque idea, have you considered utilizing a story deck where specific circumstances and gameplay move the story forward or unlock cards, similar to the method used in the Shy Pluto expansion of Space Base? You know, Matt, I hadn't thought about that, but I really do like that element of Space Base, especially in a campaign that lets players progress at their own pace, gives players a common goal to focus on, even though they're competing against one another. And I really like that feel in a game. I really like that feel in Clank Legacy as well, where players are competing, but they have common goals that they're trying to collectively pursue and achieve, thresholds to reach, things like that. So I hadn't thought about that, but I really like that idea. Yeah. Just scrolling through the comments here for questions. Ben says, status on expansions on the expansion for My Little Scythe. Yeah, so here's the news on My Little Scythe, the latest update. Panda, our manufacturer, is back up and running now. I don't think they're fully operational, but they are operational. They still have some employees that are in Wuhan, kind of under quarantine. But Panda itself is not in Wuhan. They are separate, and they are starting to ramp up production again. And the reason that's relevant to My Little Scythe is that there are a few components that I forgot to put in the expansion. And so they need to make those components and then air freight them to our various fulfillment centers. So they are working on a timeline for that, and I should have that information pretty soon. I was hoping to kind of announce it today and start talking about it today, but I didn't have official confirmation of the schedule. I didn't want to jump to any conclusions there. So it's happening soon, but it's not quite ready yet. Chad says, I noticed that the new Colossal game, Hunt the Ravager, is having a hard time reaching its $6,000 Kickstarter goal. Do you think this could be the result of the trouble that Kickstarter had with Kickstarter rules? Is it possible that people do not trust Colossal as much as in the past? That's a good question. I don't want to, and definitely don't want to speak poorly of any company. I know you're not doing that either, Chad. It could be a trust issue. It could be, there are many reasons that a campaign can falter. Art, graphic design, gameplay, price, presentation on Kickstarter, all those things. And I think all those things are relevant even for a company that has returned to Kickstarter many times. I think even like Cool Mini or Not, who has done very well on Kickstarter, they've had some campaigns that kind of just faltered out of the gate. Not many, but a few. And so I think having a big built-in audience is not a guarantee, and you still need to focus on those little detailed things. I don't know if that's the case with this particular game, but it could be. Michael says, what's the name of the clothing again? It's Ludo Cherry, L-U-D-O, like game, cherry, like the fruit. Someone asked, I actually can't, it looks like a Chinese name, I can't read it, any new games coming up? And we do have a new game. In fact, if you look at our e-newsletter, we have a chart that shows the progress on our various games. And you can kind of see the order of our next releases. And that order does change over time. You might compare it to a past e-newsletter and see that order has changed a little bit. But it's kind of a big status progress chart of our various products. You can see that the My Little Scythe expansion is next, and that we have a new game, codenamed Sand, that is next in the order. Chris asks, how are Biddy and Walter? These are my two cats. Chris says, our youngest is working on my wife to allow a cat in the house. He's trying to show that he's responsible. That's great that your child is trying to show that he's ready to take care of a pet, because this is a big commitment. I was just commenting to Megan the other day that when I got Biddy, I didn't. I was excited to get a cat and I was thinking of at that time, but I wasn't thinking of how long term of a commitment it is. Like Biddy is now 13 years old, and he'll probably live for another 6 or 7 years, and I'm glad that he will. But at the point where I got him, I didn't think of, oh, this is something I'm going to have for 20 years. Like, we don't think of many things that way when we get them. At least I don't. That's a long-term commitment. And so I wonder how many people buy pets without thinking, oh, myself in 15, 20 years, I am still going to be taking care of this animal. Will I still be as committed to doing so in that time period? And I don't know. It's a hard question to ask yourself at the time when you're getting this cute little kitten or cute rescue cat. Walter was a rescue cat. Biddy was a rescue too, but he was a kitten at the time. But to answer your question, Chris, they're doing well. They're doing really well. Kai says, when can we expect some news about the My Little Scythe expansion? Oh yeah, I just talked about that, Kai. Just catching up here on questions. Tomer says, will 2020 have only one new game released? It is looking like that. I was hoping to have two. I generally hope to have two, but I also don't want to rush games that aren't ready for release. So there was a game that I was hoping to release this year, and it just isn't ready, and it won't be ready in time. And there's another game that mechanically is ready, but it will take a lot longer for the art to be done, and so it won't be ready either. So unfortunately, it just looks like one game, but that's okay. We have some really fun big expansions coming out this year, including My Little Scythe, the Tapestry expansion, and we're on track for the Wingspan, the next Wingspan expansion, although no guarantees there either at this point. Ernani pointed out the idea mentioned by Matt above about having a story deck like in the Shy Pluto expansion of Space Base. Ernani pointed out that the story element could be similar to the one in Mary Kaibo. I'm actually curious, anyone who's played Mary Kaibo, have you used the story cards in that game? We played, in the one game that I played, we did use them, and it was actually interesting to use them and introduce and add them to the deck and have them in the deck for all future games. So that's a kind of a nice streamlined way of doing that. When you meet new characters in the world, that you just add them to the common deck, and they are part of the common deck from then on. You don't have to like sort them out. I think that's fairly low maintenance and a nice way to introduce new stuff to the game. Clank Legacy does something very like that too. Let's see. Let's pause there for questions. Let me jump back and see what else is going on over here. I'll talk about more about the e-newsletter. One thing, the next comment in the e-newsletter that I mentioned, the next piece of news is that Joe has spent quite a bit of time revamping our retailer locator. It used to just be a long Google Doc list that you can see on our website of retailers in your area. But Joe spent a lot of time and effort. I really appreciate Joe for doing this. And now if you are looking for a retailer in your area, you can use our map-driven system to do so. This was not easy to put together. Joe put a lot of effort into it, and he did it for you and for the retailers out there who want people to be able to find them easier. And so if you go to the retail locator on our website now, it's under the shop menu in the upper right of our website. You can, it should go automatically to your location, and then you can scroll in and see different retailers in your area. You probably already know about them, but maybe you don't. Maybe you want to discover some new retailers in your area. I'm sure there's some that aren't on the list, but the list is created by retailers who have contacted us and said, we want to be on this list. We want to be on your retailer locator. So if you don't see a retailer on there, it's because they haven't contacted us. But we did our best. There are, I think, over 700 on that locator right now. So Lewis said, in fact, before I forget, I love Matt and Ernani's idea about adding story cards or adding cards to a deck. I guess the Shy Pluto method is different than Mary Kaibo. I think I prefer the Mary Kaibo method a little bit, but both are relevant. So I'm going to write that down because I want to think about that some more. Lewis says he just got Scythe on the weekend. He's loving it so far. He said, he says some very nice things. I won't repeat all the nice things, but thank you, Lewis. Oh, you don't even have a question. You're just saying very nice things. Thanks, Lewis, and I'm glad you're enjoying Scythe. Very nice of you to chime in and say that. Dave says, do I have a favorite Magic the Gathering card or set design? I actually have a video, if you're interested in this. I have a video about my top 10 favorite mechanisms found in Magic the Gathering. I did this a while ago. And the two of my favorites, two that often come to mind, are Suspend and Landfall. Suspend is one where you kind of set a card aside for a while. You pay a small cost and set it aside, and you put some counters on it. And every time you have a turn, you remove one of those counters. And when you remove the last counter, the card just comes into play. And usually these are very expensive cards if you just want to play them from your hand. But because you played them for a lower cost, you feel like you're getting them for free, and you get this awesome thing for free. I love that. It's kind of like the viticulture method of having grapes and wine age on their own. You get them on your crush pad or in your cellar, and they just get better and better on their own. I really like that feeling of progression without you having to even do anything. And I also love landfall, because sometimes in Magic you're playing lands and you already have enough, you don't need to play them. But landfall makes every time you play a land a strategic decision and an impactful one. It always feels good to play lands with landfall. So I love that mechanism as well. I know that's not exactly your question, but that's the closest I think I can answer it. And I do have a new video coming up soon about Theros Beyond Death, the new Magic set. Sounds very grim. It's actually not that grim, but we hosted a draft a few weeks ago, and I have my video coming up in a few weeks. I have a couple videos that'll launch before then. And speaking of which, my Sunday sit-down video, this most recent one, was about my top 10 favorite games right now. So if you check out my YouTube channel, if you're curious about what my favorite games are right now, you can see what those games are. Stonemaier games aren't eligible for these top 10 lists that I make, but so if you're interested in our games, it won't be on the list, but you can find a lot of other great games from other publishers on that list. Rob says, my updated 10 steps to design a game video, you mentioned during step 8 that may be the time to hire a developer. Could you talk more about developers, like ones that I've used, what they might cost? Is it a subject you might do a video on? What does a developer come into play when you are self-publishing versus looking for a publisher? Or how does a developer come into play? So there are a couple of types of development. I'll answer really quick here, Rob, because it is a longer topic. Maybe I'll do a video about it at some point. One type is the type, like I am a developer for games that we publish that I don't design. So I spend time, I basically have the designer send me the most recent version of the game. I play it a few times. I offer feedback. I discuss it with the designer, and the designer then takes that feedback and incorporates what they think is best, and then they playtest it with playtesters and send me the next version, and then we rinse and repeat until the game is ready. That's one version of being a developer. Another version of being a developer is a designer may design like 60 to 70% of the game. They have a fun, functional game, but they want it to be even more fun, even more functional, even more balanced, even more intuitive. And so they might send the entire game to a developer for a while, for a few months even. And the developer might spend extensive time on it, completely, not necessarily reworking the game, but really refining the game and handling everything that goes usually into that part of design stage. Like they find playtesters, they revamp the files, and eventually they send you back a completely revamped game with a better rule book, better files, better components, all that stuff. I think that's how a developer is traditionally seen in the industry. The one other time, I haven't done that. The one time that I've used a developer was during the playtest process, actually, for Charterstone. Let's see if I can find it on the side of the box. There were a few developers we credited here. Yeah, so developers were, where are they? They must be in the bottom of the box. Developers, here they are. Isaac Childress, who's now known for Gloomhaven, J.R. Honeycutt, Cody Lewis, Joseph Pilkus, and Charles Wright. And basically what these developers did was I sent them a copy of the game, an early version of the game, for a weekend. And they spent time playing it for a weekend. So I wasn't looking for extensive feedback. They were essentially being blind playtesters for the game, but these were people who had experience in game design and development. And so they had further insight than I think a playtester might. And so they helped, they playtested the game and offered some very detailed design-oriented feedback. I could go into deeper detail. I know I haven't completely answered your questions, but that's a starting point at least. And maybe I'll continue that on a future video. Mike says, what new things can we expect with the Tapestry expansion? You know, Mike, I'm not talking about it yet, but I do appreciate your curiosity about it. And there's some really exciting stuff. There is a brand new element that I'm introducing, and some new mechanisms within existing elements, and also just more stuff. I won't say what that stuff is, but there's more of it. But we're still wrapping up the design for it, so it's going to be a while before that's ready. Gerald says, have I played Jaws yet? He says it's very similar to Scotland Yard, and the theme shines through. I have not, but it is on my to-play list. I've heard great things, and I'm very curious about it. Let me pause there for questions and jump back over to my topic, see if there's anything really important. Actually, let me jump over to the new e-newsletter. Yes, okay, yeah, so there are two topics. One is, last week I posted a poll on my blog, and I love it if you haven't responded to this poll. I love your feedback about deluxe components in games being in the standard version of the game, being add-ons, having a standard version of the game and a separate deluxe version of the game, different options for that. So far, like, our strategy has been to produce essentially deluxe versions of the games as the standard version of the game. It leads to higher prices, but it's usually, if I have a specific vision for the game, I want to deliver that vision to everyone, and not just a certain group of people. But there is a game that I'm working on that I think could be, like, there are a few things that aren't necessary for the game that could also enhance it, but would significantly add to the cost. And so I'm trying to decide if I should publish a deluxe version of that game that we just sell directly, and then have a standard version of the game, and then a separate deluxe add-on pack that anyone who buys the standard version and then wants to add on the deluxe stuff, they can do that. So it's something I'm debating on my blog right now. Feel free to weigh in that poll. Currently, I think the results are showing that most people, let me go over here and see what the current results are. So most people have or 50% of people have chosen the deluxe game with everything included. That's what they would choose if they were going to buy one option. And then 31% of the people say that they're most likely to buy the standard version of the game now, and then maybe add the deluxe upgrade pack later. Then the two options that were chosen the least were standard game with optional add-ons, like instead of having a deluxe pack, they could add the metal coins or the special miniatures or whatever. And the least chosen option was the standard game, just having the standard game. So it looks like many of our customers at least want nice things, even if nice things are in the standard game, apparently. And the last topic I mentioned in the blog is that I posted our 2019 stakeholder report on the Stonemaier Games blog just on Monday. So if you want to see how we did last year, how we grew, mistakes that we made, things that we're looking forward to in 2020, feel free to check that out, because just by watching this video, you are a stakeholder. You are investing your time in Stonemaier Games, and I really appreciate that. And I think you deserve to see behind the scenes, like some business stuff behind the scenes that you probably wouldn't normally see from a company. It's all there in this stakeholder report. Feel free to check it out. Steven's question is, did you see that Garphill posted a warning message of sorts on their Kickstarter page for Viscount of the West Kingdom to notify backers that copies will be sold at Gen Con, which could or would occur before all backers get their copies? I thought that was an interesting, good idea. Yeah, I saw that too. It's right at the top of the page. I think they made it very clear. And I actually really liked that they said, if you are the type of backer who is going to complain about this, A, we're telling you up front, so don't complain. And B, this project probably isn't for you. So I like that they were very upfront about that. I've seen many companies be very upfront about that, but they did it so clearly. You cannot miss it. If you somehow back that project and you don't see that, that's on you. So I applaud them for doing that. Aqua says, did I get a chance to check out Jade City yet? I think are you referring to the book Jade City? And if so, yeah. It was Jade. Well, Jade City was the first book, and then Jade War was the next book, I believe. I've read the whole series so far. I'm just waiting eagerly for book 3. Has book 3 been announced yet? I would love to pre-order it so I don't forget it. Josh says, if I had to take my creative and business skills to do something other than games, what do I think I could excel at? He gives examples of movies, retail, fashion, food. Ooh, I don't know. I mean, I've dabbled in book publishing a little bit, but somewhat unsuccessfully. I don't know. I think I could certainly apply. In fact, I try to do this on my blog. The topics that I write about on my blog, I think, can be applied to any type of business, any creator who's making anything, not just board games. So I think I could apply a lot of my skill sets to another industry. But I don't know which one. I haven't really thought about that, Josh. It's a great question. I should probably have that in mind for a backup in case this board game thing doesn't work out. TJ says, is there going to be an upgrade pack of new starting civilization resources for Tapestry? I think the resource tokens. No, I mean, they're already custom plastic shapes, and they're designed so that they're flat, so they can stack on top of one another. So realistic resource pack, I don't think would work particularly well for that. But maybe Top Shelf Gamer, if they want to do one, they might already have one for all I know. Let's look it up. Let's look up topshelfgamer.com and see what they have. Topshelfgamer.com. Do they have Tapestry? Tapestry. Does not look like they have Tapestry special resources. They do have colored landscape bases compatible with Tapestry. That's pretty clever. Cool. Yeah, that's at topshelfgamer.com. But feel free to mention to them. They're always looking for new stuff to make, and they need to hear it from people if they're going to justify making it. So let them know that you want it. Ernani says, what impact is the coronavirus having on Stonemaier Games? Any delays because of that? Yeah, I mean, Chinese New Year was significantly extended as a result of it. Basically, everything that we had in production was bumped back by a month. So yeah, it's about a month delay on everything. Peter says, have I played the story modes in Uwe Rosenberg's Reykholt? I have not, Peter. He says they are just cards that alter a rule or two for that game. It seems like an easy way to add some variability to an existing game. Have I considered doing something like that for your less complex games, like Between Two Cities? That's a good question. I've done it for, haven't actually, I'm trying to think of games that I have done that for. I don't know if I have had a global rule change other than Charterstone. Charterstone on sale again today, reprint available. Charterstone does that in pretty much every session, but I don't think any of my other games do that. I probably should. I mean, that's a nice little tweak to have a slight rule change, a common goal to follow for all players to pursue, and have that change from game to game. I've usually kept that as a static element of game. Like in Scythe, you always have the same 10 categories, although there is an element in the expansion that changes that. And each player has their own private objectives that change, but the global stuff doesn't change. But I should probably play around with that design space a little bit. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Adam says, any hints on mechanisms that will be in the new Stonemaier Games game this year? I'm not going to hint at it yet. I appreciate your curiosity a lot. But you can, the code name is Sand, so you can maybe think about that code name and what it might mean in terms of the mechanisms. Let me jump back to, actually, I've covered e-newsletter. We're done with e-newsletter today. This e-newsletter, I think, had the longest list of games that I've played recently. If you scroll down to the end of the newsletter, you can see all the games that I played recently. Not necessarily for the first time, just games that I played. And it is a long list. I played a lot of games in February. It's a good month. All right, back to my topics real quick. Games that I played even more recently than the newsletter are Spirits of the Forest and Sagrada. Megan's parents were in town this weekend, and so we taught them some. I mean, they know how to play games, but it's nice to just focus on some lighter games. So we played Spirits of the Forest and Sagrada, both of which went over very, very well. I also played Escape Plan last Wednesday. I finally played Escape Plan. I have a video coming out about that soon. And I played Glenmore. A delightful time with Glenmore. Really, really good. Glenmore 2 Chronicles. In fact, I learned it on Thursday, and then I played it again that night. I taught and played it that night because it was so good. Really, really good. Yeah, pause there. I have a few other just fun little topics, but nothing all that serious. So I'll come back to that in a minute. Tony says, have I ever grown a beard? I see in Tony's avatar that he has quite an impressive beard. And Tony, no, I'm not. Growing facial hair is not one of the things that I'm good at. I have tried in the past. I did one for Movember to support cancer awareness in November, and it just looked creepy. It wasn't good. It wasn't a good look. So I have generally stayed away from facial hair. It never really fills in. It's kind of a mix of light and dark hair. It just doesn't look good for me. I wish I could. That would be awesome to try at some point, but I don't think it works for me. Isaac says, have I heard of the Gamers Ranch? Huge property with a lot of games. It's close to me in Missouri. Do you get a chance to go on gaming getaways with friends ever? I have heard of it, and I've actually talked with the owner a few times. He's invited me to go by for a couple of days and visit with some friends, and I'd love to do that. It looks amazing. It looks like an amazing property. but I haven't done it yet. And I'm glad to hear, Isaac, you said you're checking it out this summer, so that's awesome. You'll have to let me know what you think of it. Do I do gaming getaways? We haven't. We've played around with the idea, and we looked at some cool properties, some like bed and breakfast. I think there's a castle somewhere in Indiana, maybe, or Illinois. I would love to go to a fun, really interesting space and play games for a couple of days, but has to be the right place. And so Gamers Ranch might be one that we consider someday. Chad says, do I regularly frequent DeviantArt or ArtStation so I can take note of artists that you like? When starting a new game design, when do you start searching for an artist that fits the theme? I don't do that as much as I used to, because I have such a long list of artists that I want to work with already. There's a blog post on Stonemaier Games blog called 200 plus artists and graphic designers that I love and admire. So I have plenty of them, but to get ideas, I really should go there more often, ArtStation, just to see that kind of the visions for other worlds that different artists have. And your other question, when starting a new game design, when do you start searching for an artist that fits the theme? It often happens even before I start designing the game. I see an artist that started to work on a project, and I'm like, oh, I want to design a game in that world, or I have a world that kind of fits the style that artist is working on. And so it often happens very early in the process for me. Jeremy says, honestly, could you play base Clank now after being spoiled by the wonderful experience and the final board game state of Clank Legacy? Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I've kind of put everything in one box, and I think the tricky thing for me, and I haven't read the post-campaign rules in Clank Legacy, but I'd like to put a lot of the cards together. I'd like to shuffle everything into one big deck, but I don't want it to have any overlapping cards. So that's something that I'd like to do at some point, but I want to find out if there are any rules about the best way to do that, because we'd have this huge deck of cards that we can draw from if we do that. Max says, what do I think about the Cool Mini or Not Marvel United game ending today? I love Marvel. It's a beautiful looking game. I haven't backed it because I typically don't gravitate games where you're just like kind of fighting the bad guy. That isn't the style of cooperative game that I really enjoy. So, and if that's incorrect, if that's an incorrect perception of what the game is, let me know and I will give it a closer look. But I kind of looked over it and I was like, oh, it's another game where you're playing a bunch of good guys fighting one or more bad guys. So just didn't seem like a great fit. Just got a text to, I got a little political there on a text there, and I'm going to cancel out of that. Have you been getting a lot, if you're in the US right now, you're kind of going through primary season, are you getting a lot of like promotional text for candidates and whatnot? I'm finding that to be a little annoying. Sean says that he played Wingspan over the weekend. It was fun as always, but we were wondering, what is a good score in Wingspan? I would say anything over 80 is a solid score. 90 is very good, and anything over 100 is very good. It was great. David asked a question about Codename Sand, and David, again, I don't reveal information about games until the time comes. So I really appreciate everyone's curiosity about Codename Sand, but today we're actually talking about Charterstone. Charterstone is the highlight today, and for the other expansions and games that we have coming out in 2020, I'll talk about them when the time comes. Adam says, will I be in Canada at all this year, conventions or otherwise? I'll be in Alaska, but not Canada. So kind of close. Gerald says that my Kickstarter account uses my personal name, but legally is it tied to you or Stonemaier Games? It's tied to Stonemaier Games. Jimmy says that he loved hearing about the details of development. I answered a question earlier from, I think, Rob about development, game development. How do I prep the designers for changes development might bring? Are designers ever resistant to the changes? Yeah, Jimmy, actually, one of the things that we do when we start to consider a game for publication at all is that we throw some criticism, oftentimes some pretty hard criticism, at the designer because we want to see how they respond to it. Do they get defensive? Do they say, okay, I'll think about that? Do they only say yes and okay, yeah? Are they just a kind of a yes man saying, okay, I'll do a lot of stuff? We don't want any of that. We want someone who is able to hear feedback well and come back to us and say, I like this idea, I want to try this idea and this idea. Come back to us and say, oh, I already tried that and this, and I don't think it works because I already tried it. And come back to us and say, that idea just doesn't fit what I was going for this game. So I want to have a discussion with the designer. I don't want them to only say yes. I don't want them to only say no. And so that is our way of testing the waters of how well a designer will be at, how good a designer will be at accepting and handling constructive criticism, because they're going to get a lot of that during the development process. Amin says, what are some fun mechanisms to have in a card-based party game that is aimed at the general public? Fun mechanisms to have in a card-based party game that is aimed at the general public. Typically, those games have more luck. That luck isn't a specific mechanism, but they can have more luck. I have found that I really like games that feel somewhat collaborative and cooperative. Telestrations and Just One. So you might look at those games for ways that people feel like they're working together and having kind of silly fun while doing so. That would be a starting point, I think. Jonathan says LCG. I think your question is what is, I don't know what the question is there, Jonathan, but you're asking about the LCG. I am possibly working on a living card game. And you said, what is Sand? Sand is the code name for a game that we are releasing in 2020. And that's all the information that I'm putting out there about it. Chaz says that he's picking up the Wingspan European expansion this week. Will it all fit in the base game box? Yeah, I mean, the box will raise up a little bit because it includes another insert for the cards, but you don't necessarily have to put that in the box. It's up to you. Just something that we included. But our focus in general when we design expansions is not, will it fit into the base game box? It is, let's design the best expansion possible. And if it fits, that's great. If not, it doesn't fit, and that's okay too. We understand that your shelf space is limited, but we're more focused on the quality of the product than whether or not it'll fit. Mary says, you have beautiful white teeth. Oh, thank you, Mary. And what's my secret? Also, are you enjoying this season of Survivor? I am very much enjoying this season of Survivor, and I brush and floss every day. That seemed to help. My teeth are not as white in real life as I think they appear on camera, but I appreciate that. Let's look over my topics again. I had some fun little things. Megan and I are watching Big Little Lies right now, a show on HBO, and really enjoying it. We finished the first season, and we're kind of racing through the second season because we really like the characters on the show. Usually I try to say what I'm listening to right now. Usually I'm listening to like a podcast or game review. And right now I don't really have any that are queued up, but I am listening to the show Actually on the College Humor YouTube channel. It's a very, very funny trivia show about kind of nerd trivia that I really enjoy. It's called Actually. And I'm reading a book called The Dragon Republic. It's the second book in a series of books called The Poppy Wars. Kind of a Asian fantasy novel, a series of novels, trilogy, I think. And it is excellent. It is a fantastic trilogy. If you're looking for a new fantasy series to get into, new fantasy trilogy, it's not finished yet. I think the book 2 came out a few months ago. And I think it'll be a while before we see book 3, but it's really, really good. That's called The Dragon Republic. Tom says, every time I see these videos, it looks like someone locked you in an attic to design games for them. Who is that someone? I need to know. It's myself. It does kind of look like an attic. We're on the top floor of this house. And I guess it does look like that over there, the slanted ceiling. But I have a very open door over here that you can't see off camera that I can walk out of whenever I want. At least that's what I tell my captors, or what my captors tell me. Phoebe says, oh, and Mary, you asked about Survivor. I'm loving the season of Survivor. And Phoebe brings up Survivor here as well. Do I have any top player picks? You know, I'm a little, my preferences are oddly skewed this season because I like the characters that have been on multiple seasons. I know them so much better than some of the other people that it's hard not to root for them. But at the same time, they aren't necessarily the ones that are strategizing better than all the others this season. So I'm rooting for a variety of people. I predicted early in the season that either Sandra or Yul would win. And so that was my early season prediction. And Phoebe says she's doing a fantasy league draft with some friends, and she has Queen Sandra, Sophie, and Danny. Interesting picks. I won't, in case someone isn't caught up, I won't reveal what those picks mean in terms of the show right now. Mo says, can I explain the difference between design and development in your table? Oh yeah, the progress chart in our e-newsletter. Design is like the initial construction of the game, all the way through several layers of blind playtesting. It's creating what the game actually is and getting to the table, creating the prototypes, playtesting it. When it gets to the development phase, at least on our progress table, it means that the game itself has already taken shape, and development is just making it more fun, more balanced, more intuitive, more functional. So it's usually like when I was designing Scythe, it went through so many versions that don't even come close to resembling the final version. And then at some point, it kind of just became Scythe, but it still needed a lot more work at that point. It needed more asymmetry. It needed asymmetry, period. It needed better balance for the player mats, and the factory needed a function. It didn't have a function early on, so all that stuff was added. But it was Scythe at a certain point, and then that was, I think, when the design process essentially ended and development began. Oh, Aqua says that the book 3 of the Jade series that we mentioned earlier has been announced. It's called Jade Legacy. Ooh, awesome. I'll have to see if I can go ahead and pre-order that. Thank you so much, Aqua. I really appreciate that. Another kind of Asian fantasy series. Maybe that's something that appeals to me, which makes sense. I studied abroad in Japan. I love Japan, and I'm very closely tied to China now due to my production facility there. Chad says they see the Iron Harvest Lego mechs on the Scythe Facebook page. I did not see that, but that sounds awesome. How cool would it be for someone to make them for Scythe mechs? Yeah, that would be awesome. I'd love to see that. Steven says, is there any game in my personal collection that I've blinged out with third-party extras? Have I ever made a fan expansion to a game in your personal collection? So let's see. I definitely haven't answered the second question. Let me look at my collection to see if there's any blinged out. I mean, I have blinged out a few games a little bit, but mostly with components that I already have. Two examples. One are Tzolk'in. Tzolk'in, I have realistic resources in it that were made by Stonemaier Games. And Yedo. Yedo has, this isn't a Stonemaier thing, but the late James Matthey once very kindly sent me a bunch of coins that would fit in an Asian-themed game or a Japanese-themed game, any really Asian-themed game. And so those metal coins are in my copy of Yedo now. James was very nice to send them to me years ago. Very nice guy. I still miss him. And Steven says, have you ever made a fan expansion to a game in my personal collection? This game isn't in my collection, but I was somewhat critical of Gloomhaven when it came out for a variety of reasons. But one of the big reasons was that I felt that the scenarios were repetitive. Every scenario felt like, oh, we're fighting more creatures. We're going to go fight some creatures for a while, and then we're done. And I was hoping for more kind of mysteries and secret doors and kind of puzzles to unlock as you play. And so after criticizing it for that reason, I wasn't kind of pointing it out, but my video about Gloomhaven does talk about how I feel it's repetitive. I realized, I shouldn't be so critical if I'm not able to actually design a version of a Gloomhaven scenario, basically, that fits what I was wanting out of Gloomhaven. And so I did. So I made it's a very odd circumstance because I don't really play Gloomhaven at all. I haven't played it in quite some time, but I designed a fan expansion for Gloomhaven that you can find. I think it's still on our website somewhere. It's definitely on Board Game Geek. And it is a mission that describes what I was hoping to get out of Gloomhaven. It's a lot more puzzly, a lot less combat than you would find in any other Gloomhaven scenario. And I've heard that Frosthaven, the not reboot, but the sequel to Gloomhaven, is going to be a lot more like that. A lot more mysteries as you enter these passages. I think they'll still be combat based, but a lot more puzzles to solve as you're in the scenarios themselves. It's not just how are we going to kill all these creatures. All right, people are making guesses about Codename Sand. And Elaine says, have I played Parks yet? Yeah, I've played Parks a couple times. I have a video about it, and I did a post about it fairly recently on Instagram because I found that it plays really well with 2 players. Matthew says, I'm designing a board game. Any tips? I have a lot of tips, Matthew. I would recommend watching my YouTube channel about my favorite game mechanisms. If you go to the Stonemaier Games blog, you can see there's a blog entry called How to Design a Tabletop Game. But I know you're looking for a specific tip right now, so I will say play a lot of board games. Play a lot of board games that you know that you'll like, and play a bunch that are outside of the genres that you would normally play, because I think you'll learn a lot from them too. Ivan says, have you played Luxor? I have not. I've not played that, no. Brian says, Ravenwood Castle in Ohio is a board game getaway. I think that is, I've heard of Castle Con. Is that maybe held at Ravenwood Castle? I've seen photos of it and it looks amazing. I would love to go to Ravenwood Castle at some point. It is a little far away. Ohio is a good 7 or 8 hour drive from here. Curtis says, how do I avoid having overly polarizing art? Is having many people love the art worth having a lot of people really disliking the art? My wife and I are interested in the recent North Seas and West Kingdom series, but the art is too much for us. Interesting. I don't know. That's an interesting question. I know art is highly subjective. So there are people who probably look at Wingspan and don't like it. I don't understand that. I think it's beautiful, but there are people out there that are more than welcome to think that. I don't know. I think a art direction is a weird thing. I'm still learning about it from some of the best out there who are able to find exactly the right art for the game. And even then, it's very subjective. I don't know. I don't have a great answer for you, Curtis. I think I agree that art is polarized, and I agree that it's subjective. And I think it just takes someone at some point saying, this is my best guess of what the art should be for this game, and going with it and embracing that. I think it's much more often that I see games with art that isn't distinctive or is just kind of dull and blah. I see that a lot more often than art that is distinct and just isn't to my taste. And I almost prefer that. I would prefer a game to have a very distinct art style that just isn't for my personal preference, than a game where the art is just kind of there, you know? That's my personal preference. Jeremiah says, for those on the fence about buying and playing Wingspan, get off the fence and get it. We had a group of 3 couples, and it was a most phenomenal experience. We wish we could have played something else first, because we believe we played the best legacy game on the market first. Well, that comment made my day, Jeremiah. Thank you so much. He's talking about Charterstone, the reprint of which is just freshly on our website now. And Jeremiah, I would actually recommend, I would say give Clank Legacy a try. Charterstone I love, but I think Clank Legacy did Legacy perhaps even better. I think it's an excellent Legacy game. But if you love village building and worker placement, I think Charterstone is the game for you. If you're more about deck building, that would be a Clank Legacy fit. Chaz says, is Charterstone a Legacy game? If so, is there a recharge pack? Yes, in fact, I think we were the first. I think the whole concept of having a recharge pack for a Legacy game came from Charterstone itself. There might be someone else that did it first, but I'm pretty sure that we did it first. So it is a Legacy game. It's a 12-game campaign. It's completely playable after the campaign is over, but you can also flip the board over. It's a double-sided board, and play a second campaign on the back side of the board if you have a recharge pack. Daniel says, for smaller publishers, do you feel it's better for them to hold out a niche in the industry and be innovative, or play it safe and be established before taking bigger game design risks? I would say both. I would say carve out a niche so that people know you're the company that makes this. You're known for this X style of game. And within that niche, take risks. Take big risks, small risks. I think you got to go both ways. I think you have to have a little bit of both. But I love the idea of publishers doing innovative things and specializing, being known as the publisher who does this one thing really well, and embracing that for years and years. I think that's great. I'd rather have that than a publisher that's just trying to throw a lot of different darts at a board and hoping that some hit. Matthew says, am I open for submissions? We do have a submission form on our website, Matthew, that you're welcome to check out. You will see there that we are currently not open for it, but you're welcome to still submit it, just that we aren't considering submissions right now. Josh says, when can we expect a new game or expansion announcement next month? I was honestly hoping to announce the My Little Scythe expansion today, so it really could be any day now. I will probably wait until early April to do it, but I think April 1st is actually a Wednesday, so that would be when I would announce it. But if it's ready to announce before then, I might actually even announce it before then. I might do a special e-newsletter in the middle of the month. We'll see. Adil says that he just started playing Charterstone, such a fun game. I don't think it gets the love it deserves. Quick question, why are the meeples different sizes? That is a question that will be answered during the campaign, actually, Adil. It's a question that I asked myself while I was designing, and I was like, why are these different sizes? And there is a reason for it that will emerge. You'll find out what it isn't like a big deal, but there is a specific reason. Amin says, have I watched any Asian dramas? None that come to mind, but name a few famous ones, and maybe I'll be aware of them. Tyler says, who am I rooting for on Survivor? Yeah, I kind of talked about that a minute ago. I'm kind of rooting for some of the old school folks that I've seen on many seasons, but I also really like Yul. Yul has only appeared on one season. I think he's great. I'm mostly, I mean, it's for a season to have all winners. I'm kind of still rooting for everybody. I want someone to just maybe step out from the pack a little bit, which I think is so tough to do in a season of winners. So I'm open to anyone winning really at this point. John says, how about a weekly live cast of me playing a game, any board game? People have asked about that. I appreciate that. Maybe enough people have asked about it that I might need to do that someday. I will say that I am not particularly entertaining while playing board games. I'm just there kind of thinking and playing through the game and having fun with friends. And B, my camera setup really isn't good for that. I use a webcam that's attached to my desktop here. So it isn't all that really conducive towards a live cast setup at all. But maybe we'll figure out how to do that someday. Yeah, I appreciate you suggesting that. Howard says that his group has been revisiting older games. He said that we made an El Grande part of our Spanish-themed game day last weekend. I love themed game days, so that's pretty awesome. Which older games do you like to revisit? I think this came up on last week's chat too. I love Scotland Yard. I love Downforce. I love the modern version of Downforce, but I think Downforce is a much older game too. What are some other older games that I enjoy? I'm looking at my shelf here right now. Most of them are fairly new. Yeah, those are probably the two main kind of classic games that come up time and time again. But I feel like there's another game that I'm not mentioning that did make my recent top 10 that just isn't coming to mind right now. Al says, I really appreciate how approachable you have made yourself both to the fans and to the industry. Thank you, Al. I try. I mean, I'm just a person like any of you. So yeah, you appear to spend a lot of time and effort crafting a very strong brand, both in quality of production and types of games you publish. Was this by design or did it evolve over time? I would say. I would say my methods have changed over time, but for that first Kickstarter I launched for viticulture back in 2012, I was all in. I mean, I was all in for. I didn't think of it much as a brand then, but more for the people who were choosing to join the campaign, complete strangers from around the world. I realized that I wanted to connect with them and make something awesome for them, and be transparent with them, gain trust with them, have a relationship with them. And so in terms of time spent, I spent a ton of time on that campaign and afterwards and for the years that followed. So yeah, I think it started pretty much from the beginning, but my methods have changed. How I manage my time has changed over time. But that type of commitment to connecting with people and just talking about games, having fun talking about games with people has been there, I think, from the beginning. David says, as someone who often plays and talks about lighter games in your favorite game mechanism videos, would you ever consider designing and publishing a lighter or shorter game? We do have one. We have Between Two Cities, which is like a 20-minute game. It's essentially maybe a long filler game. So we did publish one, but we kind of refocused and realized that we want to really focus on event games, like the main meat of a game night. It doesn't have to be a 2-hour game. We do have games that play in, Between Two Castles plays in about 45 minutes to an hour. But kind of looking for that 60 to 90-minute sweet spot is our primary brand focus. Mark says, any plans to include revised Civilization mats in the Tapestry expansion? No, there are no revisions to the Civilization mats. There are a few starting changes to a few of the civilizations, but they're all printed on a single guide that you can print from our website, and they'll be listed on the back page of the Tapestry expansion. But reprinting the mats, I just don't think is necessary. It would be very expensive to do that. Sonia recommends Rise of the Phoenixes on Netflix. It's about ancient China, a feud between the princes and how to expand the empire without families taking advantage of the emperor. Oh, pretty cool. Yeah, I haven't heard of that. I'll have to check that out. Rise of the Phoenixes. Phoenixes. Ben says, how often do I play Scythe? Not as much as I'd like. I mean, I play a lot of games, but it's fairly rare that I play the published versions of my games. I usually wait for friends to say, hey, I want to play this. Will you play this with me? I think the last time I played was maybe 2 months ago. Lisa says that she'll be playing Scythe for the first time at Tennessee Game Days this weekend. That's awesome. I hope you have a good first experience with the game, Lisa. Chaz said, oh, no, Chaz doesn't. I'm just scrolling here looking for questions. Patrick thanks me for the games that we donated to Play and Win for GameCon in Cedar Rapids this weekend. Looks like a few conventions happening this weekend. George says, what do I think about randomness in board game design? I was reading about it lately, and it's interesting how a game should consist of an idealistic balance between randomness and skill. So my favorite style of randomness is where I always mix up input and output randomness. I'll call it input randomness, could be incorrect, but it's where you randomize something and then make a decision based off of it, rather than entering something like a skill test and then doing something random and finding out the result of it. So like in Euphoria, you roll your dice when you retrieve them, and then you use those dice to place them. You aren't saying, okay, I want to go to this action spot, and then I'll roll my dice to see if I can even put a die there. That is the type of randomness that I don't enjoy. I like the upfront randomness. I have a whole video about skill tests that you might find interesting, George. Look up skill tests on my YouTube channel, because I delve a lot into that, about the type of skill test where I like that you have a lot of information going into the test, rather than saying, okay, I want to do this test, and we will randomly find out if I succeed or not. That is not the type of skill test that I prefer. Adam says, what do I think is the best legacy experience for only 2 players? I know that Charterstone works well with 2 players. I've heard that Pandemic also works pretty well with it. I have not played any legacy game with only 2 players. I have played Space-Based, the Shy Pluto expansion with only 2 players. It's not a legacy game, but it is probably something that you'd only play through once. It's a campaign, and that worked very well. So I would recommend that, actually. Keith says, when looking for new art style artists, in addition to ArtStation, he picks up the Spectrum book every year to check out what people consider the best fantasy sci-fi art of the year. That's pretty cool. I bet we could get some great ideas from that, Keith. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Keith, if you guys don't know, is a pretty famous game designer and publisher himself. So he knows what he's talking about there. I think I really like that recommendation from Keith. Just scrolling through to see if there are any other questions today. What time is it? It's almost 11. Wow, time flies today. Ben says, how do I feel about collector's edition items for games, items that might be higher price tag for people who are very dedicated to a particular game? That's actually kind of the topic I was talking about in my deluxe games post the other day, Ben. I think for me, I think the main thing is that other than having a special box, I like the idea of components being available to everyone on an ongoing basis as long as there's enough demand for them. So the types of collector's edition items that I don't like are those that are only published once. I'd rather have like deluxe components that are printed on a regular basis as long as people want them. Phoebe says, one thing Mark and I are trying to understand is KickTrack. Do I have any insights about what KickTrack is useful for, or whether it's worth investing time into trending on there? I do think a number of people visit KickTrack and are curious about what the top 10 projects on KickTrack are at any given time, but I don't think it's worth really investing your time into. I would spend more time on other ways of getting the word out about the project. Andrew has a very nice comment here, so I'll read it out loud. He says, just wanted to say thank you for your games. Scythe is the favorite game for me and my wife, and we love Viticulture Wingspan Tapestry as well. They've been a cornerstone of my time with family and just me and the wife. And I like that you mentioned the word cornerstone. Cornerstone was the original, and thank you, Andrew, for your comment. I don't mean to spin off right away, but thank you. That means a lot to me, and I'm glad that you've had fun connecting with your wife over our games. Cornerstone was actually the original name for Charterstone. but we had an internal discussion at the company and decided that Cornerstone wasn't the best fit pick, I think, both in terms of the name and there was a legal reason too. And so we changed it to Charterstone. Fun fact about Charterstone. Jimmy Hudson says, I might have missed it, but any word on the expansion for My Little Scythe? It could be any day now. I was hoping to announce it today, Jimmy, but I'm waiting on some information from Panda. So it'll probably be in a week or two. Maybe at worst, I'll announce it and start talking about details on April 1st, our April 1st e-newsletter. Phoebe says that she really enjoyed Aeons and Legacy with 2 players. I could totally see that. I played it with 4, but I could see it working well with 2 players as well. Al says, have you got any clear thoughts on my recent poll regarding deluxe versions of games? It does seem that there is a preference for me to publish, at least in the right circumstances, a standard version of the game, a deluxe version, and then a deluxe upgrade pack for those who buy the standard version. I'm very open to doing that, or at least trying it on the right game. I wouldn't do this for every game. It would not be an ongoing strategy. It would only be, okay, if I can't make a deluxe standard version of a game because of the expense, I might split it into 2, especially if the deluxe stuff isn't necessary. If it's just like metal coins, I think are the classic example of this. Metal coins could be an a la carte item. So if it's just metal coins, they would just be an a la carte item. But if it's metal coins and a few other things, I might combine them into one pack and one box. Adrian says he's excited to be teaching Stonemaier games at Gen Con this year. Thank you for doing that. Anything I should keep in mind? That's a good question. I don't really manage that process, Adrian. I've handed it off to the wonderful folks at MeepleSource and Darian. A guy named Darian helps out a lot with coordinating volunteers and how to introduce people to games. So I think you're in great hands with them. They will help you do that. I do have some videos that I send up to ambassadors a couple times a year. I think it was in our maybe November or October ambassador newsletter where I talk about how to teach our games. I have videos about all that, like how to teach Scythe. You're basically giving enough information to have them start the game, but then you are helping players take their turns for the first few turns. So basically get players to start playing the game as soon as possible, within at most 1 to 2 minutes. Have them start taking turns and then explain concepts as you go, as you help each of them take their turns. Al says, did I get the chance to visit Europe for expos much? No, I don't. I haven't ever been to a convention in Europe. I don't go to many game conventions at all, really. But I do hope to travel to Europe in the near future. I think Italy is next on my list. Sharon says, what's your one encouraging advice you would give to newbies entering the world of designing and publishing board games? My one encouraging advice. I would say have fun with it, Sharon. I mean, I love designing games, and so I would encouraging. I would just say, find the fun in game design and pursue it and embrace it. You can look at lots of advice. I have plenty of advice about it, and I think that advice is worth considering at some point. But if you're not having fun, don't do it. And if you are having fun, focus on those things that you are really, really enjoying. For me, example, I love the brainstorming process. Sometimes I spend too long in that process, but I love it so much that I'm okay with that. I want it to be fun. I don't want to burn out on game design. So I'd rather focus on the stuff that I'm excited about. And actually, that's one other thing that I might say. I would suggest having 2 game designs going at a time. That way, when you're more excited about one, you can focus on that one and set the other aside. And then when you get maybe a little tired of working on that one, you can jump back over to the other one. And eventually those 2 games might end up being at very different stages in the design process. So you get to engage different parts of your brain and different parts of what you're excited about by maybe working on one game that's in the prototype playtesting stage and one that's still in the brainstorming stage. So I'd recommend having 2 game designs going at a time. Yeah, okay, it looks like I reached the end of the questions. Thank you so much for joining me today for today's Sunday, or not Sunday Sit Down. This is not Sunday Sit Down. This is a Facebook live chat. I really appreciate your questions, and I'm going to go post this video on YouTube now. So if you have any follow-up questions or comments, the best place to put them is on YouTube. YouTube is better at alerting me than the Facebook is. So yeah, thanks for joining me. Have a great Wednesday and a great week. I will see you next Wednesday. Take care.